Okay, first thing I can do, I think, just looking around, take that off. Find research on that. Okay, good morning everybody, my name is Courdace. I suppose by brand I'm a career academic. It's not a bad thing, has its challenges. The great privilege is often, like you, in an audience, being fascinated audience members. And I think before I even start with a little commentary on reflections on realistic medicine, I just want to say that Scotland, you're on something very, very special. I think it's, there's a level of authenticity in this narrative that is quite rare. And I want you to elevate it, and I want you to sustain it. Because we all need to partner up on this. And I think there's loads of indications that this is a really strong movement that you can offer the world. And the reception of the series of reports and of the authenticity, I think, is a great movement for change. So you'll probably tell from my accent, I stem from the other end of the country. And to be fair, my academic experience has predominantly been as a health researcher with fieldwork sites in NHS England catchment areas. But over that period, 25 odd years, I want to share with you that there are encouraging positive changes in the infrastructure supporting research that are being championed as much by the funders as by the partnership working that is present in the sector as the sector changes. And we've heard some very personal stories, some touching illustrations of some of the authenticity. I haven't got any pictures of pets. Unusually for someone who trained as a psychologist, I'm going to try and not talk about my children. But I'm going to talk about, I suppose, the indications and the usefulness of some of the things in that arena that I think are just an accelerator for the realistic medicine agenda. To be fair, my favourite part of the phrase is the realistic bit. And I think we understand what it meant when the word medicine is there. But it's broader than that. And I'm pleased that previous speakers have expanded that two-component phrase to have other endings. I've spent my career collaborating with those who are interested in health research. That activity is applied health research. My own research is closer to public mental health and community-based understandings of health variations. And I suppose I'm a longitudinal psychologist, but I'll put my hand up straight away. I'm not a trained clinical health professional. I've spent my career collaborating with them, using the capacity building and research infrastructures that are in place in England, Scotland, and ones I know well, to try and promote good practice and useful research in mental health. So my pointers to you really this morning are a couple of reflections from when I look back over the things I've done that I think have been useful, or been involved in, not done personally, but contributed to. And provide a couple of signposts of things that you might want to follow up on, but also just to support this initiative and to embrace the notion of realistic. Because the one thing that I've always struggled with, and you probably will have this own challenge, when you try to explain to your parents what you do in your job, I think psychologists have always found that really difficult. And also doctors probably find it really easy, and maybe healthcare professionals in general. But I think paradoxically that realistic medicine as a concept is a conversation that would really, really help me in that regard, in a way that saying that I'm a psychometrician really doesn't cut the mustard at home. So, on we go. Okay, so I'm Tim Courdace, as I say, I'm a healthcare professional. My career has been in population-based health research. So I use this brand longitudinal psychologist because what we're trying to understand is essentially choices, how we are as individuals, how we feel at the time, what questions we might want to ask, and what answers are available. So my profile in a rather dull sense is on this slide. And not many people know professional psychometricians. They're quite rare in this country. Essentially it's to do with how you deal with data from measurements or assessments. It's a very respected part of the profession within education, for example, and it has a contribution to make within applied health research. That's the kind of stuff I do when I'm at my desk as an analyst. But actually, the principles of good assessment in that domain are can contribute really to the agenda that we have here. Because when I train, and I train a lot of analysts in the skills required to do analysis of assessments. When you say you're a psychometrician, they talk about instruments and they talk about questionnaires. Many people think that the value of assessments is in the questions you ask. And I can tell you from both a technical and a practical standpoint, the value in assessments is not from the question, it's from the question and answer options that are allowable. And in some sense, some of the usefulness of assessments is constrained by the limited answer options. So when technically I have to advise on optimizing an instrument for measurement, the limitation often comes from not knowing the thresholds or the options available for the answers. I want to offer some signposts because we're not distributing materials today particularly, but I want to provide you with a little mental bookmark of things to follow through on. So I'm going to use really, I'm wearing the colours of colleagues or collaborators, and I'm going to share a couple of pointers to useful components of research that might be assets to this agenda. My own journey as a non-clinical psychologist has been through medical schools. In Nottingham, I work primarily with community psychiatrists. So my take on mental health has been very much from a population perspective and the social psychiatry epidemiology. So I worked with doctors who had trained in psychiatry but often had become epidemiologists as a further training. And the important thing about epidemiology is that you need the denominator. You need everybody to understand the numerator, to understand the rates of things, incidence of disease in populations, and an understanding of time. And it's population-based mindset that a general purpose psychologist will often bring, because the thing that fascinates them is individual differences. And we all would casually say, everyone is different. But in situations where there are choice options, that means that we won't all have the same choice. The challenge for services is to meet the challenge of multiple options in a realistic way, because to do it exhaustively is practically impossible. So there's a degree to which personalization is an aspiration. It would describe a conversation, but it's a challenge to a strategy that has resource behind it. And a step towards that agenda then has to be understanding how much diversity or heterogeneity one can entertain in a narrative that says greater choice and questions can be asked. I moved through medical schools in Cambridge and York, and I suppose came closer to what we now think of the architecture of health research in England, built by the investment was the National Institute for Health Research. And I suppose also became aware that annual reports from CMOs, CNOs and the rest of it can be great narratives to navigate the future. I think the best of them both anticipate but understand and take the best of what has been and push it through to the future with a greater vision. And I think we've seen several of those in realistic medicine, and the evolving series of reports as part of that. To be honest, visions need support and they need infrastructure support. And one of the luxuries of working within an architecture that is built to support those kinds of initiatives is that you're relying on the distribution of funding that supports research and capacity building, where often the budgets are held not by universities, but by partners within the health and care system. They train the research workforce of the future, that's what we mean by capacity building in research, and they embrace the best of the visionary principles that can improve the quality of that research, its diversity, that will change access for patients to services or for people to agendas. And it makes sure now, even at the level of funding committees, enabling patient and public representatives to question, for example, candidates for personal awards or principal investigators for large investments. And one of the luxuries I've had as an academic is to be able to sit on some of those committees and to listen to the contribution that the question asking and the question answering, the yield from that encounter when the panel questioning turns to the opportunity for patient public involvement representatives to interrogate a researcher or a research program. Is often some of the most compelling exchanges the funding panels listen to. And I think it's a great strength that is the way the sector is moving forward in the right direction and can only enhance the quality and also the agenda that we are pursuing today. So I like realistic medicine, as I say, really because of the realistic bit. And for me, looking back, there was a period where realistic complexity was a phrase that was being used to support funding. So research councils have worked over one period, released money under an analysis of large and complex data sets initiative, where essentially what we're saying is, if you have population-based data, comprehensive, appropriate sampling of diversity in your catchment, would be another way of thinking about that, and potentially repeated data over time. So you're revisiting a set of opportunities for understanding. Gleaning information from those resources is a challenge. And one of the hooks that was used by the community was around understanding realistic complexity. And I think realistic complexity is something to do with going beyond simple slogans type statements to being as respectful as one can be of the predominant sources of heterogeneity or diversity. And it's in that area that we made great strides, and some of the opportunities to do that downstream of those initiatives have been, I suppose, to do with what information do you need to collect repeatedly. If you're evaluating interventions in a health service or in a health and social care setting, what do we understand by those outcomes? What are the characteristics of individuals that contribute to risk profiles? How many dimensions of risk are there? How many dimensions of outcome are there? And that brings some of those narratives alongside some of the collaborations I've been involved in. I'll just point you to two here in case they are useful in your pursuit of making a change. So I wear the colours really of University of Sheffield here. John Brazier taught me when I was studying health services research, and in recent years with a tremendous team have pursued this project called Recovering Quality of Life. It's a well-developed measure for recovery-oriented quality of life, co-produced with service users and by probably the only project I know of in this country that recruited 3 expert psychometric advisors. And I was privileged enough to be able to join that team. This is visible in the literature and being field trialed, and its method of development, as well as its adoption, I think, is a possible asset to realistic medicine. So take a look, see what you think. This is about published work currently. There's videos online, and we're happy to discuss with any of you. And my final pointer really was just to highlight that this is not the only systematic review available in this area. Other systematic reviews are also available. We've supplied a small technical resource to this project. And the notion that patient empowerment can be reliably and validly assessed is something that's very important, I think, in this arena. And Marion McAllister at the time I was working with, and downstream of this review, we pursued a project or a grant application to try and bring a new measure to life. Like many things in academia, not all grant applications succeed. I think this is a very good review of an important construct. I'm aware that we've kept amazingly to time, and I'm committing to giving the next speaker the full time period, so I'll draw my presentation to a close. Thank you very much for listening.